When is it appropriate for someone to give up a dream? That's
Yeah.
a tough one, right?
Just in my DNA, I generally don't know what can't be done. I go forth with blind confidence. And yet, it is important at some point along the way to say, okay, this is not working. I'm moving on to something else. I'm going to give up, declare victory, even though you haven't achieved the objective. If I would have ended up getting a deal and doing a national talk show, my whole life would have gone down a different path. And I wouldn't have done all the things I did since then. Who knows? I wouldn't be in Mexico enjoying this incredible weather and pursuing the questions experience, for example, or writing a book and learning about the finance world, and on and on it goes.
I'm Garrett Wong, and this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you? Randy, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's a delight to be here, Garrett.
Absolutely.
I know you're in Winnipeg. I'm glad I'm not in Winnipeg right now. I love Winnipeg. That's where my dad's from, and I'm enjoying the weather here a little bit better.
So you're going to start that right off the top, are you, Randy? Okay. No, audience, Randy and I were just talking in the green room. He's actually living in Mexico right now, and I'm in sunny. It is sunny actually in Winnipeg, and it is unseasonably warm, -2 for the audience. So that's actually not as horrifying as it sounds, because normally we'd be just after Christmas at the time of this recording about -20, -25. So we're enjoying the balmy weather. I won't mention about your balmy weather, but thanks for throwing that out there.
Yeah. And when he says -2, remember that's Celsius. So
True enough.
it's
True enough.
yeah. The weather is something that we can be mindful. Obviously, you've decided to live in Winnipeg. It's not the best weather in the world. As I used to say to people when I lived in Calgary or moved to Calgary, Alberta, and people would complain about the weather, and I'd say, "Hey, stop complaining. We didn't move here for the weather." So if you if you go on vacation in Mexico and you get bad weather, okay, well, I get the picture.
Yeah, no, true enough. No, I lived here my whole life, born and raised, so I love it. But why don't we back up a little bit, and you can give a bit of an intro to the audience about your background.
Well, I guess I have what they would call an eclectic background. I feel like I've lived, I don't know, 10 or 15 different lives. I am a Canadian. I grew up in Edmonton, which is probably, if there's a colder place than Winnipeg, it might be a tie for first place there. And very blessed to be from a working class family, and 4 kids. I have 3 siblings, and somehow I had some kind of weird gene. I grew up with a level of self-confidence, which is I've learned is very unusual. I basically always felt I didn't know it couldn't be done. So I was a bit of a black sheep in the family. Two of my 3 other siblings went to university. I did not. I was very blessed to be in a high school in the 70s, the early 70s, that was experimenting with new forms of learning. They had this thing called community-oriented education. So in high school, I got to design some of my own curriculum, or I worked with the curriculum, but I designed my own program. So I look back on it now; it's fascinating. In high school, I was part of the school radio station. I actually published a community newspaper. I was helping a young singer-songwriter, kind of like his manager. I was a bit of an impresario with him. I played some sports, and I also had a full-time job in a shoe store. And there's a couple other things that I did in high school that I realized in later life. I ended up doing those things, in my adult life. So I have been, for all my sins, I've been a newspaper publisher editor. I when I was 19, I had the opportunity to start my own weekly newspaper business and did everything, sold the ads, took the pictures, went to the council meetings. And at the same time, I also got into being a recording artist manager. Um, Ended up in with my own television company, so I've worked in all aspects of television, producing in front of the camera. The only I haven't actually been behind the camera as a shooter, and it's just been one thing after another. I guess if I was born 30 years later, maybe I'd be medicated. Because I think there's certainly I'm on some kind of ADHD spectrum for
Yeah,
sure.
we have a label for that. I have it as well. It's called the overachiever ADHD gene, I think. But
Yeah, but when I say my background, I just pursued things. I even, after while I was running my weekly newspaper business, like at age 22, I ended up doing a story on the local police department, and was fascinated by that because I had wanted to be a policeman, and they had an auxiliary program which I decided to join. And I realized, even though I had a weekly newspaper business just outside of Edmonton, we started another one in Edmonton. We ended up with a chain of 4 newspapers, and I was finding that I was kind of having more fun going out in the police car as a second man auxiliary, and I decided, "Hey, I wanna be a cop." So, I actually sold my business and became a police officer for 6 years in my early
wow.
20s, and compared to running your own business, I had all this free time. So that's when I started my recording artist management business, and I started a my own television company. I remember watching the Johnny Carson show. Most of your listeners may not know who that is. Um, it,
Well, I hope some of them do.
well, it's amazing today. There's it's the Tonight Show. The current guy, what's his name? You can help me out on that. He's actually born on the same day as me. I actually became the Johnny Carson of Edmonton in the mid '80s, creating my own show while I was still a police officer. So bizarre. And I've also, worked in politics. I helped in the early stages of what was the Reform Party with Preston Manning in the early days, again the late '80s, and then had the opportunity when I had a business failure actually in the mid '90s to be hired by Preston to come and be a special advisor to him in Ottawa for the better part of a year, and on it goes. Just one thing leads to another. Basically, I've been self-employed other than the police job my entire life. I'm 68 now, and I've been through incredible ups and downs. I've had great success and also stunningly awful failure and business failures and failures in my own personal life. And, you know, Garrett, when I was in my 20s, I was a very confident young man, probably to the point of I was confident to a fault. And, if you met me then, you may not, you may not like me. My theory at the time was, it's not a popularity contest, and, I've come to learn over all these years that it is kind of a popularity contest. It's important if people like you. So, I cared what people thought about me. Well, I was pretty arrogant young man, successful and my own I like to say my own poop didn't stink, and, so I was ready to be humbled, and that humbling started in my early 30s, and it's continued ever since, and I'm so blessed and grateful for all the failures, personal and business, where I've had the opportunity to learn so much, about myself and get to a place now where I have some peace.
Wow, that is an incredible beginning. I keep getting reminded almost on a daily basis by that quote, and I can't remember who said it, but that you really can't have success without failure. Like, I don't know a single entrepreneur, a single successful person that hasn't hit like rock bottom, like absolute rock bottom. I can't count how many times I've looked in the mirror and wondered how am I going to get through tomorrow, make payroll, whatever it is, whatever business. So yeah, no, I'm hearing your language there. Let's back up a second because you said you've been basically self-employed almost your entire life, except for the police career, which is incredible, by the way. What a pivot. As a young person, 19 years old, how did you just like right now, let's fast forward, right? 30, 40 years. Could somebody have done what you did back then now in television, TV, radio? Because you've got these journalism diplomas, degrees, and things like that.
I don't really know how to answer that. It's like I'm kind of a bit conflicted on the idea of entrepreneurship degrees and training people to be entrepreneurs because I had no training in anything. I mean, even the police, there's the basic training that you go through, but you don't really know what you're doing until you get out there and do it. And so I mean, I've been an investment banker. I've owned an investment banking company. And I don't have a university degree. I've had no training in finance. So if your question is, can someone today, a young person, just go out there and start doing it? I actually believe that that is the case more than ever. I encourage my own kids to, get a degree because it seemed like it would be like quitting high school. My dad, because it was in the Depression, et cetera, he was in Winnipeg, actually. He sort of had to quit school after grade 9, I believe, and get a job. So he didn't even have his high school education. Um, for me, I never really enjoyed school, and I never actually even considered going to university. I just wanted to get out there and start doing things. And I knew that I better get at least my high school because if you didn't, my dad didn't really suffer. He was able to get a very good job on the railroad, and he didn't need the high school education. So that was the basic. Today, it almost seems like you need an undergraduate degree to be considered for anything. However, in the world of entrepreneurship, and especially today with these devices that we have and AI, I mean, why? I don't know why you would bother going to a formal university if you want to build your own business. You can learn everything. You can learn much quicker and much more effectively just using AI and the devices than to sit in a classroom and have a professor, teach you about entrepreneurship. It doesn't add up for me. But I'm an old man now. I get to say whatever I think, and I would never hesitate to tell someone that if they enjoy school and they're getting a lot out of it, yeah, by all means, go get your MBA, go get your PhD if that's your path. It certainly wasn't a path for me, and I know I never regretted for a second not going to school.
The School of Hard Knocks teaches us very, very hard lessons. I have a lot of formal education, and people ask me, "Oh, you quit your PhD, you've got a master's, molecular biology, you were a scientist, and like, don't you regret it? Don't you, aren't you wasting your education?" And you know what? Every education I find is valuable. And I was quite introverted and shy. I mean, I still consider myself introverted, but certainly I think standing up, we had this thing called journal club. Okay. And because it was in science, what we had to do every single week was pick a scientific research paper and present it as if it were your own, and then defend that scientist's research, if you can even imagine that. And we had a group, and you had to do this in front of the faculty. So the faculty would bring in their lunch, and it was like entertainment for them to just rake us over the coals. And how do you defend work that you didn't actually do, right? But It taught me public speaking. It taught me how to defend myself. It taught me very good debating skills, and it taught me how to be quicker on my feet, all which are skills that I apply to this day.
Yeah, well, everyone has their own path, and in my case, it didn't involve school, and I feel like I've had, I have, and I've also pursued all these different in these different areas. Like I've been in the media world, which includes newspaper, television, radio. When the internet came along, I was just fortunate enough to be in a company that we ended up doing the first internet television broadcast in Canada in
Oh, wow.
1997, and I owned the company. And I didn't know I didn't know what the internet was at the time. I just was fortunate to have this fellow named David Chalk who was a leader in technology world, and he came and worked with us because we were creating a TV show around him. And he's the one that came into my office one day and said, "I'm going to set you up with email." And I didn't know what email was, and I didn't. We were building websites in our company, and I didn't actually understand what we were doing. Very funny story. I got a call from, this was in Vancouver. I got a call from PR firm, a guy that owned a pretty prominent PR firm. And I didn't actually understand exactly what PR was back then either. Again, no formal education. A lot of things about business I learned as I went along the hard way. And so I didn't even realize there was such a thing as PR. Anyway, he asked me to come in and have a meeting. I said, okay. So he came into my office and he said, uh, you know, I'd like to be your PR agency. And I said, well, why don't you explain what that is to me? And I said, why are you here, by the way? He says, well, he says, you could be getting a lot of publicity because, you have one of uh, the dominant website companies in Vancouver. And this internet thing is taking off. And I said, really? We're one of the dominant website companies? And I didn't say it to him, but I was almost like, yeah, what exactly is a website again? So it's
Yeah.
like, it's bizarre how, again, because I didn't know it couldn't be done, I would like charge ahead and do things. And the last thing on my mind was, well, do I know what I'm doing? And so this shoot, ready, aim type of process, that's kind of who I am. I mean, it's the best thing about me in one way, and it's also, of course, the worst thing about me because I I would say had to, but that's a dirty word out of my dirty words book. I got to learn that in some cases, I needed to get ready and aim a little bit before I started firing. It's actually a strange analogy for an ex-police officer. It's not, shoot, ready, aim. Shoot, ready, aim is not a good strategy in the police world. So,
Yeah, no, definitely. We're talking differences between left brain and right brain. And I think I tend to be more of a left brainer, very analytical, but I do tend to also be, well, what my wife would say is a dreamer. I prefer to say visionary,
yeah.
but no, I think that's what drives an entrepreneur is that vision and that they don't want to be told that it can't be done, and that's where all the innovation comes from. I mean, basically, you have a disruption type personality to just get things done.
Yeah, and I've always been motivated by just what interests me and what I'm excited about. And I've just pursued. I wanted to be a cop. At the time, I had a successful business. I was a young guy, and the people around me, including my partner, my mentor, and it's funny to say, my mentor was 35 years old at the time, a very successful business guy. He thought I was off my rocker when I said, "Well, I want to go be a police officer." And even my wife at the time was kind of like, "Oh, this isn't exactly what I signed up for." you know. But I just pursued what I was excited about and what lit me up, and and because of the shoot, ready, aim, and I didn't know what I was doing a lot of the times, and I was arrogant, and I learned a lot of things the hard way. At the same time, I look back on my whole life and I think, well, I don't really have any regrets. I mean, the personally, the way I've conducted myself, certainly in my personal relationships, I haven't been the best father for sure. And I'm on my third marriage. So yes, there's a lot of things I'm not proud of, and at the same time, all of that, I always say to people, if things didn't unfold exactly as they did in your life, Garrett, and in mine, we wouldn't be right here, right now, which is such a
Correct.
blessing, right? Including all the bad stuff, all the good stuff has brought us exactly to where we are. So the concept of regret, yeah, we want to learn from our mistakes and make changes. However, regret and focusing on, beating yourself up and feeling guilty, it's not a sane way to live your life because we're only living our life in the present. So it's too much focus on what's on the past, or even too much focus on the future, is not a good way to live life.
No, it's very counterproductive. I couldn't agree more. Um, but let's take a trip down memory lane a little bit. You've had such, I mean, we could go on for 8 hours here just picking different things. But I mean, are there some, one or two really memorable moments that you have during those early years?
Well, it depends what you mean by memorable. I have like literally hundreds of stories I could tell. What
Well, I
you're
think
interested in?
when I read your bio, you've done feature films, you've worked in television. Let's focus there. I think that's very interesting for someone like me who I'll say just has a podcast, right? Because I'm not in that world. It's very fascinating to me.
Well, I guess one of the most interesting stories I mentioned that I became kind of the Johnny Carson of Edmonton, which was I was fascinated by the entertainment talk show when I saw it on TV. And when I sold out of my newspaper business to my partner, he reluctantly bought me out. I actually wanted to continue running the business, plus go be a police officer. I thought I thought I could do everything. He kind of forced me out, and so suddenly I had a lot of free time because when you work as a police officer, you work in my case 8-hour shifts, and then you have all this free time compared to when you're an entrepreneur. And I remember watching a Johnny Carson show, and at the end of the show, it said Johnny Carson Productions, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So he's the host of the show, he's the star of the show, but somehow he's involved, like he has a company. So literally, I went down to the CIBC bank in Spruce Grove, Alberta, and now I knew a little bit about business because I'd been in business for myself with my mentor. And by the way, when I got the opportunities to buy into the Spruce Grove Examiner, that's a cool story in itself. I knew nothing about business, so I only learned. But in the 3 years, I learned a fair amount about it. And I walked into the bank and I said, "I want to open an account, a business account, because I didn't have one anymore." And they said, "Okay." I guess I must have registered the no, I think I just opened it up as a proprietorship. And, I said, "I want it to be Randy Lennon Productions," just like Johnny Carson Productions, because I thought, "I wanna have my own show like that." So that's what I did, and I noticed that I'd already been doing stuff on what was Channel 10 in Edmonton, which was the community channel when cable TV first came in. I was fortunate enough in high school to do community television programming as a high school kid. So I thought, why can't I create the Tonight Show on cable television on the community channel? And that's what I did. And I went down to the program director of what was then called Capital Cable TV in Edmonton. And I said, "Yeah, I want to create the Johnny Carson Show of Spruce Grove, Alberta." And, he he had probably the reaction of that you just had, and anybody that happens to be watching this, crazy. And he said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to do an interview show, but I'd like to have like a live audience and a band, and and let's create. And I know it's a small town, but I can start there." And he said, "Do you have any idea what it takes to produce that type of live to tape, like multi-camera, all this?" I said, "Yeah, it'd be great for all your volunteers to learn how to create a show like that." And he's like, "You are crazy, man." but but somehow he went along with it, and he said, "But we don't have the resources to do it properly." And I said, "Well, I'll turn it into an event, and I'll sell tickets to it." So, we ended up with a dinner show at the Grove Motor Inn, which we promoted. Come down and be part of the live audience, and so on and so forth. And people paid, I forget what it was, but I think it was like $25 per head for a dinner show back in the I guess it must have been the early 80s.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and it was crazy. I went down to California to actually be in the audience of the Johnny Carson show, and those tickets were free. People didn't pay to go to see a TV show. So he thought I was crazy. And we did what was called Spruce Grove Alive, and we were dead serious. And when I look back at the old videotapes of that, man, there's a show called Fernwood Tonight, which you can look it up. And Fernwood Tonight is this hilarious show with Fred Willard, and the other guy's name will come to me. And what it was a situation comedy. It was a takeoff on the Tonight Show in a town called Fernwood. So it was a comedy. It was a sitcom about exactly what we were doing in Spruce Grove, and it was hilarious. Only we were dead serious. So we anyway, I learned my craft, and some of the shows were terrible and the production values were terrible, but people came, we sold, people were like, "Wow, this is cool." We ended up doing it in Edmonton in the mid 80s for like 3 years,
Oh,
and my
wow.
goal was to get it onto network television. And at one point, the program director of what was called CFRN then in Edmonton, the CTV affiliate, because I was saying, "Hey, I'm doing this show. I want to do it now for real. Like, I'm doing it on the side while being a cop." And he invited me to come and meet with him, and he said, "You're broadcasting this show as a special once a month or so, and you air it on Friday night at 10 o'clock. And I just want to show you something." And he showed me, and we had a deal with the news, with the Edmonton Sun, and we were promoting it and so on and so forth. This was on the community channel. Okay. It was like nobody's watching. He showed me the ratings, and the channel 10 did not get broken out by the ratings because there's no advertising on it. However, he said, "I think you just won the 10 p.m. time slot in Edmonton because other has a 20% market audience share, which dominated that hour." And he said, "So I just want to congratulate you. And I watched the show myself. It's pretty damn good." And I said, "Okay, great. Well, let's do it on, CFRN in Edmonton. Let's put it on CTV." And he said, "Randy, there, we don't have the budget to do that type of show. And plus, in the primetime slots, we can buy programming for next to nothing. Like, we can get the real Johnny Carson show, from the States." And I talked to all the major broadcasters, and I met with people in Toronto, and they were like, "Wow, this is cool." And finally, they said I finally came to the conclusion that I wasn't going to be able to do a Canadian late night talk show like that, because of the way the Canadian content incentives were then. To do a late night show up against Carson and Letterman at that time, and so on and so forth, the networks, they didn't get credit for creating a Canadian show if they aired it after 11 p.m. So it would have to be in prime time. And in prime time, just the cost and the risk of doing it compared to bringing in all the hot American shows, it just didn't work. So I finally gave up on my dream of being the Johnny Carson of Edmonton or Canada. And by that time, I was, going bald. I was a little bit overweight, and like I was still a cop. It was weird. So I finally gave up on it, and we did a bunch of other things. We had a television production company. We did all kinds of stuff. We produced the local inserts for the Jerry Lewis Telethon. We did other types of programming. We did all kinds of commercials. Shortly after I gave up on my dream, this national show came out. It was the Mike Bullard Show, and it was either on CTV or Global, I can't remember which, out of Toronto. And one of the networks decided we're going to go with our own Canadian entertainment talk show hosted by Mike Bullard, who, if you look him up, he was bald, a little overweight, and he was an ex-Toronto cop.
Come on.
No. And so I watched the show and I go, this guy's no good. No, and Mike Bullard happens to see this podcast. He's still a successful comedian today, and he had a bit
Yeah.
of a thing. And what was worse than that is like he did the show. The show was quite successful, and then he switched networks. And I remember it was announced, and they gave him $1 million contract to move from CTV to Global or the other way around.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know why. I guess that's a funny, ironic, sad story because I believe I could have. I also was down to it was between me and among me and two other hosts. When Fox first started, they were going to do some wild, crazy entertainment talk show in the U.S., and they were going to move it around from small town to small town. And I was in the running to host that show as a result of what I'd done, and didn't get there. As a matter of fact, they never went ahead with the show. But so I came close to that particular dream, and I one thing I will say about that experience, Garrett, is while I was doing Edmonton Alive, and then we did a crazier version called Midnight with Randy Lennon in Edmonton, which we did every week, and it was really fun, crazy. The one thing I look back on is we were having so much fun doing these shows and being that person, and yet I wasn't really enjoying it because I was striving. I was thinking to myself, well, this isn't a real show. This is just on cable, right? So I was striving to get the real show. And when I look back on it now, we were doing a real show. So it's like, and so much of what we're in our lives as entrepreneurs, we're not really enjoying what's happening at the time. We're not fully immersed in it because we're striving. And it was one piece of advice I could give to younger people that are pursuing their dream or they're building their company. It's not it's an old saying, life is a journey, not a destination. And oftentimes we're too focused on what the goal is or building the company to this or that, or your podcast to get to X number of subscribers, blah, blah, blah. Hey, it's a journey. We're having fun doing it right now. And whoever's watching, that's a success.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I was going to ask, and I'm going to ask it before I forget, when is it appropriate for someone to give up a dream? Right.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean,
Yeah.
that's a tough one, right?
That's a great question because, like I say, just in my DNA, I generally don't know it can't be done. So that's great because I go forth with blind confidence. And yet it is important at some point along the way to say, okay, this is not working. I'm moving on to something else. I'm going to give up, declare victory, even though you haven't achieved the objective. It's a very good question because I actually, when I saw Mike Bullard doing his national talk show, I was pissed off.
Of course.
I was
Of
thinking,
course, right?
could have been me, and really it should have been me. And yet, again, I have no regrets because if I would have ended up getting a deal and doing a national talk show, my whole life would have gone down a different path.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now, like I just said, and I wouldn't have done all the things I did since then. I had some of my most fun times doing a sports talk radio show, comedy sports talk radio show in Vancouver in around 99, 2000, 2001, which, it was my own show. We did a deal with the station, so it was our own. We could do whatever we want with it. And, maybe I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have had that fun if I'd have gone down the television route. Who knows? I wouldn't be in Mexico enjoying this incredible weather and pursuing, the questions experience, for example, or writing a book and learning about the finance world and on it goes.
I think you mentioned mentors, and we're talking about dreams, failures, being told, okay, that's enough. And I think the importance of a mentor, just somebody to act as a sounding board, probably is the best thing that I could have done. And it sounds like you also had mentors, because otherwise, I've taken back to Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, Kevin O'Leary, right? I mean, I think he's now famous for saying, that's a terrible idea, take it behind the barn and shoot it, right? And, I think a mentor can do that for you and just say, I think this is a terrible idea. And always, you try to look for a mentor that has done something that you haven't, that has maybe been more successful than you. Like, I wouldn't say, if there's any piece of advice I could give to a young entrepreneur, is don't choose a mentor that's equal to you, because you're asking advice from somebody who hasn't done it yet, right? Would you agree?
Well, my mentor in business was a gentleman named Terry Clements, the late Terry Clements. And like I said, he got me into the newspaper business when I was literally 19 years old. And he was 35. He was very successful, and he saw something in me and gave me this opportunity. And the challenge is that yes, I learned from him, but and I also didn't listen to him. So if you're gonna have a mentor, um, you wanna pay attention and listen, and, he was totally set against me going and becoming a police officer, and he forced me to sell out my half of the company to him and so on. So I didn't listen to him, and yet I'm glad I didn't because I'm
Mhm.
glad I had that opportunity. I don't know whether a mentor is someone you seek out or you just, you're just open to being mentored. And, in my case, I never really sought out a mentor. I have a mentor now who's 86 or 80. I think he's around 86 years old, and, it's not like I ever decided, "Oh, would you be my mentor?" It's just we started doing some business together, and he definitely straightened me out on a few things along the way, and I'm so grateful to have that relationship with him. Definitely, I think mentorship is again, it's not something that you structure and you seek out a mentor. Sure, you can do that, and I'm happy to mentor people. I think it's more of a natural scenario, being open. Look for the people that you end up meeting in business, or you get to know, and you know be open to what they can offer you.
Well, I think mentors come in all shapes and sizes. And I mean, you don't have to meet a mentor to have a mentor. You can read a book and be inspired enough.
Oh yeah.
I was given advice by my mentor just last week to get 3 people, right, in your circle, um, and you can pick whatever you want. They don't have to be necessarily a business person, but just as a sounding board. 3 people, just say, "You guys are my sounding board. I'm gonna bounce ideas off of you. I might not listen to you, but I just want the feedback, right? And I think that's also a really good piece of advice because that's kind of your market, right? I know that you reached out to me because of my work with the Winnipeg Jets, and I'm on the season ticket advisory board. And I thought that I got onto the board because of my business experience and the fact that I'd been a past president of a very large board here in Manitoba. And I guess in large part I did, but when I saw the 12 people, the 13 people, pardon me, that make up this, I mean, they had some young 20 somethings, they had people my age, they had an ex Indigenous politician, they have some entrepreneurs, some medical physicians. Like basically, the Winnipeg True North has taken a cross section of an entire demographic because they want to know that's their sounding board, and I mean, so, you take a piece from their strategy. And I think a sounding board is a very, very good strategy for anybody.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. It sounds very innovative what they're doing, and I hadn't heard of an NHL team so they have an advisory season ticket advisory board.
Yeah, so we're a small market up here, and basically they have had this is no, old news, I guess, but in 2011 when the team decided, like, they bought the Atlanta Thrashers and we got Jets, what we call 2.0, the season tickets sold out
Yeah.
in like 15 minutes, right? 15,000 or 12,000 season tickets. I think they left 3,000 for walk up. They were just gone. And then over the years, maybe they became complacent, who knows? But that season ticket base started to erode off. And what they didn't do before was, approach the businesses, because the businesses like mine didn't have a chance. I've now obviously just bought into it, which is why I'm on the advisory board. But there's a lot of different things that happened over the last few years, a lot of maybe. I'm not going to say that True North took anybody for granted. Certainly, I've received opinions like that, but they're basically trying to say, how can we improve the patron experience, and what better way than to get a cross section of season ticket holders? So, I have to commit to 4 full days. Okay, it's not just an hour. It's not a Zoom meeting. In person meetings with your executive, touring the facility, looking at the numbers, the actual numbers, engagement, concessions, before, during, intermission, pre-intermission, post-game, all the entertainment that they do. We basically gave an opinion on all of it. Um, and so, I mean, I feel appreciated, and I can already see that the changes are being made, you
Mm.
know? So I think it is innovative. I don't know if there might be others that are doing it. I think they said they copied the model from another franchise, but it's smart. Um, we're talking about how you reached out to me because of the Jets. I wanted to do a little bit in the middle of the interview here on your experience with professional sports, because I think that's a story that my listeners would like to hear. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I was an original Edmonton Oilers season ticket holder when they were in the WHA,
Okay.
when the team came to when they finally got into the NHL and got raped by the NHL, all we got to hang on to was Wayne Gretzky and I think one other player. Just crazy. And I was very excited to be a season ticket holder. My dad was a huge hockey fan. We hated the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens, especially when the WHA started,
Yeah.
and they didn't even mention, like, you watch Hockey Night in Canada, they didn't even say the scores of Edmonton and Vancouver and Calgary. Anyway, that's a whole other. I think there's some deep seated resentment still there. I've
Well,
got.
Edmonton is now up there because of Connor McDavid, maybe, but no, I believe me. So my wife is French. She's a Jets fan, but her entire family are all Canadians fans, right? So considering this is being aired on December 30th, right? Just went through the whole Christmas and talking with the in-laws, and we joke about it, but yeah, I mean, it's a very healthy. It's a thing. The small
Oh, yeah.
markets don't get the attention they deserve.
Yeah, so we came very close to losing the Edmonton Oilers just like the Jets were lost, in, the early '90s there, I was, a relatively successful business guy, and also because I was in the recording artist management business, I was the manager of a guy named Tim Feehan, who you probably don't know of him, but you know some of his songs. He won the Juno Award in 1987 as Best New Artist. But I actually met him because he recorded a duet with Vicky Moss, who was Wayne Gretzky's original girlfriend. And through that, he met Wayne, and I had them on my television show actually, and I ended up becoming Tim's manager. So through that particularly, and like Tim sang at Wayne's wedding, the famous wedding in '88, I think it was, just before he got sold to the Kings. And I was doing business in LA when he was sold to the Kings, quote unquote traded. And I remember being at the press conference in Edmonton, everybody's crying, and I'm thinking, this is pretty good. This is going to be good for hockey. And I spent a lot of time down in LA at the time, and it was so true. It was excellent for hockey. Anyway, in the early 90s, when Peter Pocklington, the owner of the Oilers, was going bankrupt, he was actually put into bankruptcy. The Alberta Treasury Branch ended up owning the Oilers, and they had to sell it to recoup some of their losses on Pocklington's business ventures. So it came down to someone had to step up with $50 million to buy the Oilers and keep them in Edmonton. And there was a buyer out of Houston ready to go. And there was a deadline. And so, one of I wouldn't call him a friend, more of a associate, someone I really respect, Bill Comrie, the founder of The Brick, one of the wealthiest guys in Edmonton. Everyone kind of looked to him like, Bill, buy the team, keep it in Edmonton. And at that time, he had kids playing hockey, and he actually, two things, they didn't want him to own a hockey team, and B, he actually had some doubt about the future of the success of hockey in the U.S. Anyway, he said, "Look, I'm not going to buy the team, but I'll help. I think maybe we can put together a group of investors in Edmonton." I mean, he was a person that could have written the $50 million check, chose not to. There's probably two or three others that could have, but it's just like in Winnipeg, like no one was stepping up. So I was at the time producing television commercials in our company for a guy named Cal Nichols, who had a fairly successful chain of gas stations, and he was a huge fan, and he had actually helped the previous couple of years. They had a season ticket drive campaign to qualify for incentives that the NHL was offering to balance off the Canadian-U.S. dollar. He had led that, and I said to him, "Cal, we're going to lose the Oilers here. Someone has to step up." And he said, "Well, I don't have that kind of money." And I said, "Well, what kind of money do you have? Like, how much could you put in?" And he said, "Well, maybe 5 million, I could do it." I said, "Well, it's 50 million. We need to get 10 guys together to put in, and I remember having that conversation with him, and I was not wealthy enough. I couldn't even participate at that point. Certainly not for 5 million. However, I said to him, someone has to step up. And he said, "Well, why would it be me?" I said, "Cal, it's got to be somebody. And you led the season ticket campaign." And he kind of went, "Yeah, I guess so." And so, lo and behold, he and Bill Comrie didn't want to participate, but Bill Comrie helped. There was a meeting pulled together, and it all came together. They ended up with 36 owners, some of them putting in as little as 1 million. And that included the Edmonton Journal. Southern Press actually put in $1 million. So and I worked with that group. My job was to see if I could find outside of Edmonton investors, which was really fun because I met with some celebrities and talked to some of the high-profile former Edmontonians or former Canadians that might want to participate. We did get one of those in, not through me, famous video game or cartoon guy. I forget his name at this stage, but I approached so many. It was really fun. I approached a lot of wealthy individuals. Anyway, so I played a little small role in keeping the Oilers in Edmonton, and but later on, when I started spending a lot of time in Phoenix, I just thought, when the Jets moved to Phoenix, that was a disaster from day one. It's the worst run franchise in the history of professional sport. And everybody in Canada said, why don't we bring them back to Canada? They should be in Winnipeg. They should be in Quebec City, whatever. This whole idea that the Bettman had to expand into the southern U.S. We as Canadians all thought he was crazy, and so on and so forth. And when I spent time in Phoenix, I mean, there's probably at certain times of year more Canadians in Phoenix than there are in Winnipeg. Certainly more than there are in Regina.
Yeah.
It's actually a great hockey market, but they built the building out in the middle of nowhere, and it was terribly managed. So, and I had the experience of being on the Calgary Flames executive in 0304, and when I joined the Calgary Flames as an entrepreneur on the management team, they were looking for, ways to generate new revenues until we could get the salary cap in place. Um, Little people would be very surprised to learn that we had fewer season ticket equivalents in Calgary than they had in Phoenix that same year. Like this non-hockey market. Guess what? The Calgary Flames had won the Stanley Cup in '89. Then they went 7 straight years going downhill. They won the President's Trophy, knocked out in the first round, knocked out in the first round, 7 straight years of being knocked out in the first round. Then, when I joined the team, they were on their 7th year of consecutively missing the playoffs. So, guess what? In this hot hockey Canadian market, we had fewer season ticket equivalents than the Coyotes, and that's because at the end of the day, and the same thing could happen with Winnipeg very easily. Fortunately, you've got a great management, and the team's doing extremely well. So, but even at that, they still have to they still have to be innovative and coming up with a program to be more effective at serving the clients. Anyway, my experience with the Flames, and then loving Phoenix and the weather and everything, and seeing that it was so poorly mismanaged, I decided that I wanted to become an NHL owner myself in the around 2005, 2006, and I spent from 2006 to 2013 all on spec, just trying to put a group of wealthy investors together to buy the Coyotes, and my goal was to be the CEO and run the team. We eventually, it's a long, grinding story. We eventually partnered up with Anthony LeBlanc and some other investors in mostly Western Canada, and we did manage to buy the team. And at the end of the day, towards the end of the deal coming together, our ownership, my partners and I, our ownership piece got negotiated away. And so we made some big fees on putting the whole deal together and arranging the financing. But my dream of becoming an NHL owner did not happen. And fantastic, fantastic experience. So my involvement with the NHL is originally with, being a fan, helping with the Oilers transition. We also were involved in the transition of the Tampa Bay Lightning, the change of ownership in the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2008, which was really fun. And then being involved in keeping the Coyotes in Phoenix and working to make that happen. So instead of being an owner, I ended up with a suite for 4 years at the Coyotes games and a nice big payday for our family. Um, And now I'm actually working on some things now that in the background about innovation in hockey, with some partners that we're not exactly announcing just yet, but I'm a huge hockey fan.
Yeah, no, I had no idea that you were involved in Phoenix there. That is just, I travel to Phoenix a lot for business, and just out of my own morbid curiosity, especially when this was all happening over the last year with the transfer to Utah, I would ask my Uber driver, right? So, like, do you follow the Coyotes? And do you know how many times they had no idea what I was talking about? And I'd
Yeah.
say, well, what sports do you follow? And of course, baseball, football, basketball,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's just interesting, with Bettman trying to push, the NHL's not doing that great from what I can see. And it'll be interesting to see as an organization what they're going to do to try to proliferate everything. But I want to spend a little bit of time here talking about your latest passion project. The questions experience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, where it came from, and what it's really about?
Well, yeah, I like to say that every single thing I've been involved with, um, I've been passionate about. And the questions experience is I'm passionate about it. I believe it's actually far beyond a passion. I believe it's a calling. So that's my framing of it now. Uh, in 1997, 98, I had a business failure, and I actually tried to get a job, like I applied for, I applied for vice president of marketing, I think, of Canadian Airlines at the time, and things like that. And I thought, oh yeah, I could do that. Of course, there's no way I was ever going to get hired. And I actually engaged with what they call a career development company or whatever, where they basically help you find a job. And they said, we've got to create like 3 or 4 different resumes, all different, because you're so all over the map. No one's ever going to hire you. And I came to the conclusion I was really not hireable. So and I had done a lot of work on myself over the years. As I said, I started getting humbled in my early 30s, with personal stuff and business stuff. And I was very fortunate to get exposed to a company called Landmark Education. I don't know whether you've ever heard of them, but they do experiential. It dates back to the what's called EST training from the 60s, and it's basically mind-opening type of experiential training. At times, it was controversial. In any event, today it's very much accepted. And I was fortunate enough to go through many different weekend retreats. They had this thing called the communication course. They had and they still do today. They have a thing called the forum, and it was transformational for me. I also got exposed to people like Dr. Wayne Dyer, and various, let's call them spiritual masters, or today I'm working with Dr. Ellen Langer, who's is she a spiritual master? I don't know. She's a Harvard professor, and she's called the mother of the mindful movement. So I've always been, especially from about 1990, when I would say I was fast asleep from a perspective of anything to do with spirituality, or basically what we can't touch and feel or see. That there's more going on. There's some kind of higher power. There's some kind of that our lives are more about energy than what we can physically touch and feel. So in 1997, I'd done a lot of work on myself by then, and I decided that, again, with this shoot, ready, aim, and I didn't know it couldn't be done. I thought, hey, I may as well start my own workshops, and so I put together a plan for a weekend retreat, and I needed about 10 people to make it work, and I had 4 signed up, and I thought to myself, we're about to do this retreat, and I had it kind of planned out what we were going to do, and I thought I think I should send out a questionnaire to these 4 people, and then talk to them, have them send it back and talk to them about their answers, so that we can maybe be more effective in the retreat. So I sat down and I wrote down, like in 5 minutes, 8 questions. And I thought, oh yeah, those are really good questions, because I was thinking about, what do I want to know about this person, and what do they want to get out of the retreat? Well, it turns out, all these many years later, I've come to learn that those 8 questions that I wrote out, I do believe they were somehow divinely given to me, or sort of downloaded to me, which may sound a bit woo-woo, and sorry, that's that's what I've come to believe, because I have worked with those 8 questions now for whatever that is, coming up to 30 years, with hundreds of people. I've done workshops. I've created a workshop around it called the Questions Experience. And it's been absolutely stunning, the impact that people answering those questions and then being open to be coached on their answers, the impact that that has on. And I'm going to say this, Garrett, again, you're a left brain guy, a scientific thinker. I don't have a study or the specific evidence to back it up, and I have never had the experience where someone who answered those questions and allowed themselves to be coached on their answers, where they haven't had at least a major awakening come out of it. And in many, many cases, an absolutely, mind-blowing breakthrough, that comes through it. So basically, it's 8 simple questions. I'm not going to get into them here. But for example, one of the key questions is, what is the one thing that consistently holds you back in life?
Mhm.
And so there's 8 of them like that, in a certain order. And over the years, starting in 2005, we decided to create a workshop around them, and a one-day workshop. And I actually did it I was asked to speak at a coaching conference in Toronto with a company called Action Coaching at the time. And they were bringing all their coaches from across Canada together for an annual conference. And for whatever reason, they wanted me to speak at it. And I said, I'm doing this thing that I've created called the Questions Experience. And instead of me speaking, could we take like 3-4 hours and actually do this Questions Experience workshop? And they said, well, we've got you scheduled like a keynote speaker. Um, Anyway, I said, look, I'll do it for half the price if I can do do the Question Experience. And I really want to do this because I want to test this process out. So they agreed to it. So the Questions Experience is essentially, it's in 2 parts. The first part of it is what we call the Dirty Words Workshop. So do you know what I might be meaning by the dirty words? Have you seen the book or anything, Garrett?
I haven't seen the book, but you kind of alluded to it earlier in the interview, because I think you had said had, not need, or I'm actually butchering your paraphrasing, but you did say a couple of words there, so
Yeah.
I kind
Yeah.
of guessed that there was.
So somehow, and the concept of these words in our vocabulary that do not serve us, like but, try, should, have to, those words. There's been other books written about them. I think I learned from Anthony Robbins back in the day that, you know, what you say out of your cake hole is very important. And especially, it's bad enough to have a negative thought. We all know we have 50,000 thoughts a day, most of them negative. It's bad enough to think negatively. To actually speak a negative thought and using negative words is worse than having the thought. Now, to actually speak a negative thought about yourself is a disaster. Okay,
Mhm.
so and we're actually unconsciously using these words. Like a really good one is have to. And you, I'm going to bring you back because I noticed you said it um, about serving the Winnipeg Jets. You said I agreed to do it. Now I have to put in 4 days.
Oh, yeah.
You use the word have to,
Choose
and
to.
really,
Yeah.
what you have to like. Is this something you're being forced to do?
Right.
Are you not realize you had choice? You don't even mean you have to.
Right.
Well, you say I get. You could say I get to
Yeah.
instead of have to, which would be, and in the book, the Dirty Words book, I share all these examples to help people understand how they're unconsciously being in victim mode and and creating a reality for themselves that's not even true. I'll give you an example. My youngest boy was a really good hockey player, so of course I'm driving him to hockey and all that. And one day I'm driving him to his hockey practice, I think it was, and we had cell phones in the car and the speakerphone, and the phone rings and it's my buddies and they go, "Hey Randy, we're going over to Brewster's to have a couple of beers. Do you want to join us?" And I go, "Oh, I can't." Dirty word. I'd love to. I really should. Dirty word. But I can't because I have to drive my kid to hockey. I have to drive Chris to hockey. Dirty words, right?
Yeah.
And I realized looking back on that as an example, and we use these dirty words all the time. That's not even what I meant. I wanted to take my kid to hockey. What was I trying to do? Let them down easy by saying, "Oh, I wish I could. I wish I could, but I can't." Well, of course I could if I chose to. So
Hmm.
it's not that I can't. Why not say, "Hey, thanks for the invitation. I'm going to take a pass. I get to take Chris to hockey."
Yeah.
Now
Get to
he's
spend some time with him. Yeah.
yeah, and he's sitting in the back seat and he's hearing the words he's hearing are that I can't because I have to take my kid to hockey.
Yeah.
It was a lie. That's not how I felt. And so we're using these words. So the first part of the excuse me questions experience is we do a workshop where we really examine, and together as a group we talk about a bunch of words and we decide, let's make a list of dirty words, just like the 7 words you can't say on television. If you remember those, by the way, 6 out of 7 you can say on television now. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. So all I do in the Dirty Words book and in the Dirty Words workshop is I say, look, let's identify some words that we'd be better off not using. Like, you use the word but. You're always better to use the word and instead of but. Because when you say but, you're negating what you just said. No one is going to go to a wedding and have the groom say, I take this woman to be my lawfully wedded wife, but. Okay, like it's crazy. Now, you might say, I take this woman to be my lawfully wedded wife, and we do have a prenuptial agreement. It's like a completely different,
Right.
I love you, Chris, but I'm really pissed off at you right now. No, I love you, and I'm really pissed off at you. It's completely different framing. And when we say we have to do things all the time, that's not even true. We say, I have to about stuff like you enjoy doing the thing with the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah.
So anyway, we explore these dirty words, we identify them, and we say, look, can we agree to eliminate these words from our vocabulary, at least for the rest of this exercise where we're going to be answering these questions? So it's a fun interactive thing that really gets people thinking. And if you pick up the book and read the book, it's a fun read. It actually goes a lot deeper than just changing those words out of your language. It's all about, we explore the whole idea of how we unconsciously are living in this victim mentality or this victim culture, and how our own subconscious gets programmed by our words that we say, and we don't realize it. So by literally changing your language, you can change your life. So anyway, So the dirty words. Then we say to people, okay, here's a piece of paper. Here's the 8 questions. Answer the questions. So then they have a lunch together, and then we get in a circle. And there's an empty chair next to the facilitator. In this case, if it's me, and you decide to sit in the chair, we ask for volunteers. Okay, who wants to sit in the chair? And let's go through your answers together, and let's
Kind of like
let's
a hot seat, I guess.
the hot seat. Let's explore your answers. So they give me their answers, and all I do is read the question, read their answer. In most cases, I just look at them, and they start explaining their answer. And it's amazing what happens when you hear your own words repeated back to you exactly as they are. Then, like oftentimes they go, "Well, this, well, that," and for example, if you could change one thing in your life, what would it be? Um, they often put down a few different things. And I say, well, no. The question is, if you could change only one thing,
Mhm.
what would it be? And so it's an exploration. It's like peeling off the onion. And when we do, and if I send you the questions, Garrett, and just say, hey, just answer them on your own, even without any coaching, you're going to get a lot out of just stopping and answering those questions in that order. The last question is, what's your purpose?
Mhm.
So I have found over all these years working with, well, at least hundreds of people one-on-one, because I do this on a one-on-one, and then more, I don't know, we've done maybe 20 or 30 of these workshops over the years. There's never been one person that didn't get, didn't report a benefit out of either doing it one-on-one or being in the workshop. And I would say the majority are blown away by what. So the concept is we don't have any answers. We just help you find your own better answers to these very powerful questions. That's the questions experience.
I love it. Um, I come across a lot of coaches, a lot of coaches. I mean, I went to a speaking workshop on how to become better on stage, and of course, 95% of the room is all speakers and coaches, and no disrespect to them. And I mean, I'm saying this next part without even realizing what their businesses are about. Okay, but I like the fact that
And I'm going to correct you. And
and And I like the fact that your methodology actually has a methodology to it, with knowing that the way that you elicit the answers is the way you ask the question. So I think there's a lot of value there. Do you so I know we connected, and I think your hope is to maybe approach some professional sports teams and things. Where do you see this helping in a really large organization?
well, we have a website now called thequestionsexperience.com or tqexperience.com that is focused on bringing the questions into the corporate world. Because I have done it in the corporate world. I've done it. We just put on last summer, we put on some workshops in Calgary and Edmonton just for open to the public. Very powerful. Um, the reason I'm really excited about doing it in a corporate setting is because you've probably heard of this concept of work-life balance, especially as an entrepreneur,
Of
right?
course.
And there seems to be some concept that your work life and your business life and your personal life are two separate things, and there's some kind of Chinese wall or something between them. A lot of corporations, what we're saying to corporations now, or leaders of teams, is look, if you don't know what stops your people as individuals, period, what stops them? And we all have stuff that stops us. If you don't know what lights them up as individuals, and if your people working in your company in a team environment are not connected, then it's negatively affecting your bottom line. Any one of the three is not good. You have a combination of the three, it's a disaster. So So we say we'd like to come in and do the questions experience, and it is going to get personal because people are going to answer these. These are personal questions. They're going to be sharing them, so on and so forth. And some companies, some HR people, like, we've got to keep the uh, we've got to keep that separate. Well, that's like saying mind, body, and soul are three separate things. No, they're completely interconnected. And if you think that your work life isn't impacting your personal life and vice versa, of course it is. It's just like it's self-evident. Most people in their work, whether they're working for a company or they're an entrepreneur themselves, or they're working in a hospital, or they're working for a trucking company, they spend more time with their work colleagues than they do with their family.
Yeah.
And they have intimate conversations at work. Of course they talk about everything. So it's like, let's just accept that that's the reality, and let's have businesses create opportunities for personal development within the corporate setting, because it's only going to enhance people that are fulfilled, self-actualized, feeling good about themselves, are better employees and work better in a team, et cetera, et cetera. So, what we say is, look, if you don't know what stops your people, if you don't know what lights them up, and they're not connected, you got a problem. The good news is we can solve that problem in one day. Boom, done. And we've seen it over and over again, because in the process of doing the dirty words part of the workshop and having fun and really thinking about that, then reading the dirty words book, and then being in that workshop where, by the way, only a few of the people actually volunteer to sit in the chair. So no one's forced to share their answers with anybody. So, we're not forcing people to expose things maybe they don't want to expose. We have seen every single time amazing results and connection that flow out of that. And then, my personal um, dream is to do the questions with as many people as possible all over the world, in the corporate setting, whatever. I love the idea of making a difference. Boom, one day, a breakthrough. And then, of course, we want to keep it alive afterwards. So we've actually partnered with other companies that will do ongoing programs to follow on the questions experience. Now, you mentioned the athletes and why we want to do it with sports teams. Well, we want to do it with everybody. One thing I notice about particularly hockey players in their interviews after the games, it's just full of dirty words. Like, it's amazing how athletes are, they're so skilled and honed at their craft, and yet they're sabotaging themselves with their own language and not realizing it. So the dirty words part is very cool. And athletes are like anybody else. They have their personal challenges. And if I do the questions experience with the Winnipeg Jets, it's a group of 20, 25 people. That's the perfect size. It's going to positively impact on their performance. I know it.
Yeah, no, I think professional athletes are their own biggest critics, right?
Yes.
And we see that in post game interviews all the time. I didn't do this right. I didn't do that right. Um, getting back to the corporate setting, I want to add something there because in this today, 2024, almost rolling over to 2025, remote work, right? I struggle with it all the time. Half my team is remote, half are here in Winnipeg. We're growing as an organization. I have to plan these moves. Who am I hiring next? And I don't care what people say, remote is difficult, particularly in engagement. And I don't mean engagement in my vision, mission, and purpose of the company. I mean engagement with each other. And
Yes.
what you're talking about here, to be able to go through something like that in person or even virtually, you're creating meaningful relationships, emotional experiences together, and that can only help corporate America, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we talk about the impact of AI, and you know, very soon, maybe we're already even there. Okay, uh, you don't even know if I'm a real person. I could be a bot.
Yeah.
like within a year from now, we can probably, I could probably have my bot do this interview with you, yeah, right? So all the more reason why I mean, I'm being pressured to make the questions experience into a virtual experience, and we're probably going to quote unquote have to do that to do that.
Right. Yeah.
However, my dream is to put people in a room because as we move along this path that is changing so dramatically, your own team, Garrett, imagine most of them probably haven't even met each other.
Nope.
You may have not even met those people. So what would it be worth even once a year or once ever to bring them together physically in a room? And what would you do? Well, the questions experience would be perfect. And, maybe you could have a party afterwards I mean, so I've just, I've experienced it myself with so many people. I find myself when I'm, when I'm doing the questions with people, I somehow know exactly what to ask, and I rarely, if ever, the plan is, my intention is to never give any advice or to actually tell anybody what to do or how to think or whatever. All I do is I continue to ask and probe further with those questions, and what comes out of it is absolutely mind-boggling, and it's so rewarding. So all these other things I've done with my life, the opportunities that are in front of me right now, it all pales in comparison to the opportunity to work with those questions.
Well, to your point about remote work and having and wanting to do this in person, I mean, I'm very passionate about engagement in the remote workplace because I'm living it, I'm breathing it right now, to the point that last week we had a Christmas party. We had to do it virtually and online. Obviously, the Winnipeg group had the other group, on the screen and everything. But I am flying everybody up here once a year in the spring to meet each other for a full week. There it's a working week, but then we do things at night, and I can't think of a better thing than the questions experience midweek to be able to cement those relationships and then maybe take everybody out to a beach and a cottage and try to do that for the next couple days too. Yeah, no, you're really onto something.
Well, let's get it booked for
Yeah.
2025.
All right, we'll talk about it after.
And then
So,
we'll yeah, then we'll help the Jets win the Stanley Cup.
we will, we will.
I take credit for that, even though I'm a rabid Flames fan.
Oh, don't say that on this podcast. No, I think hockey is great. I love it. I play it. Um, I'm very passionate about it, which is why I'm trying to give back. So, final question that I like to finish out the interviews, and I ask the same question of every guest, and I'm fascinated to see what you have to say. So, Randy Lennon, this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you?
So the way I define success today is to be living in peace. So I don't care what you're out to achieve, what your goals are. To me, a successful person, whatever their circumstance, if they're at peace and they live in peace, that's success to me. And what's the second part? What's my
What does
definition?
winning look like for you?
Yeah, so winning is, there's two kinds of winning. There's winning in the context of a game. Okay, so in hockey, for example, or any sport, there's a winner and there's a loser, and it's clearly defined. And I love that. That's there's no game without a winner and a loser. And I believe in society in recent years, we've gotten away from, having winners and losers, and we're trying to moderate it all so that no one's really a loser, and we sort of attack the winners. So um, I love the idea of competition and a clearly defined winner and loser. In life generally, again, winning it's life is not just about competition. For me, the definition of winning is where there's a win-win-win. win where everybody wins. So I don't know whether that makes any sense to you, but those are two very different definitions of winning.
Yeah, I also prescribe to the win-win scenario because why can't you? I mean, you should be able to exit every situation with a win-win. That's
Yes.
my motto anyways.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our time together. We'll definitely talk after to see next steps, and I'll be putting all of your information about the questions experience and everything else that you've done into the show notes so people can reach out.
Yeah, and I do encourage people to pick up the book, the Dirty Words book. Is it a shameless plug, or is it just something that I feel very passionate about? That I've had so much positive feedback in it on it, like the questions that I'm very happy to share that with people.
All right. Well, thank you again, and we'll make sure that information gets out to the audience.
Awesome interview, and congratulations on what you're doing, Garrett. It's phenomenal, and it's just too bad you're stuck in Winnipeg. Anyway, see you later.
You started out the same way you ended. I love it. All right. Thanks, Randy. Well, take care.